Have you had a lifelong dream to live overseas and haven't made that happen yet? Maybe things have gotten in the way, like family, jobs, life. And my guest today, Christine Gritmon, didn't let that stop her. She had a family and had this lifelong dream to live overseas, and she made that happen this year, moving her entire family to the United Kingdom. Find out how she made that happen in today's episode.
Hello, dreamers. Welcome to the Late Starters Club, giving you the inspiration, mindset, and tools you need to start something midlife and beyond. Remember, it's never too late to follow your dreams.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. I'm your host, Andrea Vall, and I am here with the lovely Christine Gritmon, calling in from across the pond, as they say. She is in the UK. Currently, she just finished moving her family over there, uprooting everything, moving her family over there midlife, and we're going to dive into all of that in this show. So welcome, Christine.
Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
Yeah. Yeah, and I will do your formal introduction. Not
Ooh.
only has she moved her family across the pond, but she is a brand expert. She empowers professionals to step into their personal brands in a bigger, bolder way on social media. And you can do it. She'll teach you how. She has spoken on stages worldwide. She is a frequent expert guest on podcasts, live streams, Twitter chats. Is that still a thing? Blog
Used to
posts,
be.
as well as hosting her own weekly podcast, Let's Talk About Brand. So, super excited to have you here again. So, that's awesome. And speaking of brand, Christine is a master. She read, if you can't tell, is part of her brand. She
It
has
is.
it. She wears it, she embodies it, she lives it. It's her bag. Yeah, it's all about when you think of the color red, you think of Christine. So yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
sickness. It's a sickness.
That's awesome. So let's just dive right into what it really took. This has been a long process, and I've been
Yeah.
watching it online and watching you make this move. What was the initial thought with saying, "Hey, let's move to a whole nother country when my kids are 9 and 11?" What was the seed for thinking about doing that?
The initial seed actually goes back 20 years. I was 22, 23, and I had a breakup, a big breakup for a serious relationship, and I realized, wow, wait, I'm an adult now. Like, the next man I date, I could wind up marrying. I'm an adult. So before that happens, before I wind up with the husband and the kids and the white picket fence in the suburbs and the dog and the cat and the white picket fence and the station wagon, all of which I wanted and all of which I did wind up getting,
Mhm.
what adventures do I want to have? I felt almost a pressure to have kind of a cool adventure before I settled down. I don't know exactly where it came from, but I decided, you know what? I'm going to move to Dublin, Ireland for a year. And that wasn't quite out of nowhere. My mother was born in Ireland. My mother is from
Oh,
Galway. And I
oh.
said, but Dublin seemed like a better place to move for a young 20 something. And so I moved into a cheaper apartment. I started saving money. I got my Irish passport, which I had eligibility for through my mother. And I just didn't pull it together. Like, I just did not pull it together. There's so many moving parts to
Wow.
an international move, and you hear about people all the time who just wing it, and they seem so underprepared. And either you're not hearing the whole story, or they're astonishingly lucky, probably a bit of both. But
Yeah.
I didn't pull it together, or they have a very high tolerance for uncertainty.
Mm.
Um, Maybe that's part of it as well. Whatever the reason, I did not pull it together. So years later, when I got together with my husband, I did tell him it may creep up again someday, the urge to go have an adventure.
Yeah.
And he was like, all right, cool. We'll talk about it when it comes. And then he's the one who actually brought it up a couple years ago. So that was a combination of a few factors. Part of it was certain things happening in the United States
Mhm.
in,
Mhm.
in recent years.
Mhm. Yeah.
Definitely made us feel a little less comfortable being
Mhm.
there, a little less like America or bust, and a little more like, maybe we could peace out for a bit. So that was
Yeah.
part of it. I think that was the
Mhm.
initial impetus, but also we're spectacularly lucky that we can do that. I have Irish citizenship, and Ireland is part of the European Union still, so I can live in a whole bunch of countries. But Ireland also has a long-standing arrangement with the United Kingdom. It predates either of their involvements in the EU, which is good because the UK is no longer part of the EU, and they opted to
Mhm.
keep it. It's called the Common Travel Area, and people Irish citizens, the Republic of Ireland, their citizens and UK citizens can live in each other's countries. I'm
Mhm.
registered to vote in the United Kingdom. I didn't think I'd be able to do that, but I have
Wow.
rights. I have full rights of citizenship, which is crazy. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I set up visas for my husband and kids, and you can do that. You can do a family visa, and
Mhm.
yeah, we just made it happen. And also the fact that we could get a lot of money for our house when we first decided to do this. The market cooled a little bit by the time we
Yeah.
actually pulled it together to move, but
Mhm.
still, we did wind up getting more for our house than we paid for it. So that helped for sure.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
it just seemed like the right time, and also if the kids were younger, it would be hard because young kids, very
Yeah.
hands-on, labor intensive,
Yeah.
and if they were older, it would be emotionally harder on them.
Yeah.
It's harder when you're like a teen and you're really
Right.
kinda
You've got
yeah.
your friend group and your yeah.
I
So,
mean, it's
yeah, that's
already
really
hard for my son. My son's 11 and he was already starting to be in that zone, so,
mm,
it was just the right time, and they're the type of kids you travel with, and we hadn't. But they're
mm,
open to new experiences, they're flexible, they're best friends with each other, they eat actual food, they don't need chicken nuggets everywhere we go. Yeah, we figured let's
yeah,
go for it.
that's awesome, and that is a sweet spot of
Yeah.
time. I can see where making that decision with your kids
Oh,
is easy.
also,
So
we both work remotely too, that was
yeah.
another element of it. So, my husband, his job he used to have to go into New York City, we were not far from New York City. He used to have to go into New York City 2 or 3 times a week pre-pandemic,
Mhm.
but was fully remote the other 2 days. And not very far into 2020, they just decided they weren't gonna reopen the office. They said, "We're not having any problem doing it." He works for a tech company. They're like, "We're not having
Yeah.
any problems doing this remotely. Let's just do it remotely." So he was already fully remote, had been for years. There were no plans for a return to the office. And I work for myself, and before
Yeah.
that, I had a job that was fully remote. So,
Yeah.
that's another element of we can. So,
Yeah. That's awesome. That sounds like just a lot of things really lined up for you, and that
yeah.
is amazing and awesome that you can make it work with that visa. I know that is sometimes a challenge, and,
Oh, yeah, still will.
sometimes people yes, yeah, exactly. Even with all the things lined up, it can be really hard, but it's great. Was there ever a moment where you were like, "Ooh, let's turn this train around.
There
Let's"
still are.
Oh,
I absolutely this is gonna sound so horrible, and I'm sorry to get borderline political on your podcast, but there was a time this like, in the spring and summer where every time I would say aloud, "What are we doing? We have such a lovely life. Why are we blowing this up and doing something completely different? Ah, maybe we should stop." There'd be a shooting every time. And I'm like, "Am I
wow.
causing this?"
Yeah.
It was just really fascinating how news would just be like, "Where
Yeah.
you gonna
Yeah.
go, though?" So feel free to cut that out if you don't wanna go there, but,
No,
but I
no.
definitely and especially once so I left before my husband and kids did. I was here,
Mhm,
getting things situated in the UK, and when they arrived, there had been delays, there had been so much discombobulation, they didn't start school immediately, there were just so many things that
mhm,
made it, tougher for them than it really needed to be, that there have definitely been times we're looking at them, and especially looking at how nice and settled they were in our previous town. They had their friends, we had families that we could really trust and had good relationships with. We had actual family,
mhm,
all these things that we just kinda ripped to them from.
mhm.
I definitely still have that moment when
Yeah,
if I'm in a situation without Wi-Fi, I'm trying to get into the habit of, like, emptying the camera roll on my phone, which involves going back through the camera roll on your phone, and sometimes I look at our life and I'm like, "Why did I leave that? It was great."
uh,
But,
oh, yeah.
you know, this can be great
Yeah,
too.
yeah, and I think that's it. That's why people don't make a move like that or don't make
Yeah.
a big change because it's comfortable, and
Mhm.
it's easier. It's for sure. It's just you've got things in place, and I think the unknown is so scary. People, I'm sure, are looking at you now and just with saying, "Wow, look at what she's doing. I wish we could do that." And I think that's a hard there's 2 sides to that coin, right? So it's
Yeah, I'm really proud of us for doing it, quite frankly. I
mhm,
think it's awesome that we did. And when I have those thoughts of our life was so great, why did we leave it? I remind myself that you shouldn't only make changes when you're unhappy.
mm,
You shouldn't
mhm,
only take the step to do something that could be amazing because you're uncomfortable where you are.
mhm.
I think it's
Right.
perfectly okay to be happy and comfortable and still decide that something else could be cool. I mean,
Yeah.
I got everything I had always wanted, and it was fulfilling.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
I took the most fulfilling parts of it with me. I've got my family here,
Great.
and I've got my career. I'm still obviously having my friends who are in far-flung places already anyway. Yeah, and again, we'll always
Yeah.
go back to New York. We're about to go back to New York for Christmas break. We'll probably always go for a bit in the summer, it'll be there, and I'm talking to people I love all the time, and
Yeah.
also, New York will always be there if we decide to move back too. That's another thing.
Yeah, that is true, and it can be a great way to just say, "Hey, we've got a safety net," and to have a support system, both. It's just
Mhm.
really can really make change a little bit more palatable, so
Yeah.
that's great, that's great. So let's talk about, like, how did you go about, like, finding a place and actually like, I mean, when you can settle in any of the UK,
Mhm.
how did you go about picking, "Hey, we're gonna pick this spot?" Like, how long did that research take and things like
I'm
that?
so grateful that part wound up working out. Um,
Mhm,
so
mhm,
so first of all, the original plan was we were going to move to Ireland, not the
mhm,
UK, because that's where I have my citizenship and that's where I have family, and I do have some friends there as well. But there were a combination of things that made us go with the UK. I do know way more people here in the UK,
mhm,
including professionally, which is helpful if you're trying to make a living. Also, I felt like it was a slightly different culture change from the US. I felt like being the town I'm in right now, St. Albans, is about as far from London as where I was in New York, which is a town on the lower Hudson Valley called Nyack, was from New York City. I've spent my
mhm,
entire life within a very small orbit of New York City. So being within a
mhm,
very small orbit of London was something that we decided we wanted, but my kids didn't want to be in a city. If my kids had been
mhm,
down for living in a city, we might have gone with Dublin. But
mhm.
instead, so we decided on the UK. And originally, I was looking actually at, Brighton. So
Oh,
Brighton
I
is a
love
city on the southern
yeah,
tip of England. It's
I
pretty
went to school
accessible.
there.
What?
Yeah, I went to school there for a year. Yeah,
You
yeah,
did?
it
Was
was
it
great.
awesome?
Yeah, it was awesome. It was so great, so much fun.
Brighton is a
Yeah, I was
very cool, very fun town. So originally, we
it
were
is
thinking of
fun.
Brighton. We liked that it was very open-minded and
Yeah,
artsy and liberal and,
yeah.
like, all these things. And so last November, I had stuff to be out in England for professionally anyway. I was speaking at an event and then I was working with Adweek magazine at another event. And so I had to be out here anyway. So I said, you know what? Let's do a family trip. And so my husband and kids had never been to the UK. They came with me and they did sightseeing stuff while I was speaking. And then we took a weekend while I was in London. Then we took a weekend in Brighton, a long weekend, and we stayed at an Airbnb because we wanted to be really not a hotel. We wanted to be in
Mhm.
town.
Yeah.
And we concluded that we really liked Brighton to visit, but that it wasn't home. It was a
Mhm,
little more of a city than we wanted, I guess, and
mhm,
there's some things about cool up and coming places that were just like, I don't know, it was a little grittier than we wanted, but it's a very cool place. We wanna go back.
mhm,
But I wanted a bit more suburban, I guess. I don't know.
mhm. Yeah.
And so I just started researching. Again, we want to be very accessible to London. That was very important to us because travel's part of this, especially being able to go home to New York very easily. And
Mhm.
we just want to be near London. And I'm especially happy about that because I've since fallen pretty deeply in love with London, more than I
That's
expected.
amazing.
And yeah, St. Albans came up. We found out that Hertfordshire, which is the county we're in, was really everything we were looking for. They've got very good schools in St. Albans, which is good because the
Mhm,
school situation is not like it is at home. There's more choice, but less choice. It's weird. And we're
mhm,
freaked out by that because it works differently. So we're happy that all the schools are good. Like,
Mhm.
a blanket statement, they're all good.
Yeah.
And it just has the right vibe where if we want to go to London, it takes between 20 and 40 minutes on the train that's right here. But we don't have to go to London because we have everything we need right here. And so
Yeah.
that's the exact vibe we wanted. We're walking distance from city center, so we can go to all the things, which is great because we didn't have a car for the first month and change. So
Mm. Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
no, I researched it. Oh, we did the vibe check though. In January, my husband and I came out, just the 2 of us. Again, stayed at an Airbnb instead of doing a
Mhm.
hotel to get the vibe of St. Albans, and we loved it. We're like, "Yeah, this definitely passes the test." So,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so now you've been there for about 6 months? 4 5 months?
less than. So I
Okay.
came out to the UK, at the beginning of September. My
Okay.
family joined me October 11th, so I guess now it's the end of December, so 3 months, not long.
Okay. So are you finding how are you finding the culture shock? Because I know I went when I went to school in Brighton, I thought, "Oh, great, I speak the language. This is
Mhm.
gonna be easy." And at the same time I was there, I was like, "I don't know what these people are saying," you know?
Yeah.
Like, there's just a lot of differences, right? Different shows, different, ways that people interact, different things about how people like to be polite or things like that. So how have you found the culture shock? Talk
Yeah,
about
and
that.
different stuff that everybody just knows.
Yes.
Absolutely. I had been over here a lot, so have experienced more culture shock than I was expecting, simply because I've been here so many times and I have so many
Mhm.
British friends. I thought that it would be a little I knew that there were differences, but I thought that I knew them, and
Mhm.
no, there's
Yeah.
definitely when you live here, you definitely experience things differently. Though it's also very interesting because I very quickly just seeing the thoughts in my head on some of the cultural differences, I've been saying, "Oh god, I'm already that insufferable American who has traveled and thinks that they're, like, more worldly now." Just because
Yeah.
I'm having such observations about the cultural differences, and I have to go back I've been back twice already, by the way. So I came out at the beginning of September. I had a long planned trip at the beginning of October to come back because I spoke at Marketing Prof's B2B Expo in Boston. And then I came back at the beginning of November for my uncle's funeral. So, like, I've been back, and both times I found myself I tried not to say it out loud too much, but I was like, "That's so American," or "They wouldn't do
Mhm.
that." Um, and then especially when you have kids in school also, that's a whole other set of
Mhm.
conventions that you're just not familiar with. And thankfully, we got into there are a couple, each of my kids' schools, there's an unofficial parent-run WhatsApp group
Mm.
for the
Mhm.
year, and we're so glad we got in on that because so much of the stuff, we've just had to ask other parents.
Yeah.
Last week so the kids have uniforms, they've never had uniforms in their lives, so
Yeah.
finding out details of uniforms and how strict the dress codes are and all those things was a whole thing, but then also just certain ways you do things. They just had Christmas stuff. We didn't have Christmas stuff in schools in the US very
Mm.
much because
Mhm.
they tried to avoid the whole Christmas thing.
Mhm.
No avoiding of Christmas in the UK.
Mm.
All about
Mhm.
Christmas from August on. And there was a day where they had a non-uniform day at my daughter's school, and they said Christmas dress. What does that mean? Does it mean she literally wears her Christmas dress? Like her proof of her
Mhm.
dress? They're like, "Oh, it varies. Some people dress up as something Christmas." I said, "What do you mean dress up as something Christmas? What does that mean?" And it actually did turn out that some people dressed up as presents or like an angel or snowman or whatever, but most
Yeah.
people just wore a Christmas sweater, which is what she opted for. But I'm like, "What does that mean Christmas dress?" And
Yeah.
the parent organization, they were running a raffle for the Christmas fair, and they said, "Bring in a bottle for the tombola." For the what? Like, we've never heard the word tombola before. And there's also and of course, there's foods. It's interesting to be here during the Christmas season, especially because they take
Yeah.
it very seriously here, and they have a whole set of things that we've tried to dive into that we never even heard of. We had heard of Christmas pudding, we didn't really get what it
Oh,
was,
yeah.
so now we've had Christmas
Mhm.
pudding, we've had mince pies. I thought it was mince meat. I thought it was a meat thing. It's not.
No, I did too, and
Yeah.
it's fun it's delicious. It's
No,
chopped up yeah, chopped dried fruit, you know,
it's
right?
true. They soaked in a lot of
Yeah,
brandy for, like,
yeah,
years.
yeah.
Um And there's this theatrical tradition here called panto. Do you know about panto? Pantomime
No.
shows? Ooh,
Uh-uh.
it's like slapsticky, there's a few vaudevillian tropes that they toss in. They base it around a familiar story, like a fairy tale or something,
Mhm.
but they toss in lots of nonsense. There's a lot of tropes that you just include in all of them, whether they have to do with the plot or not. And there's
Yeah,
I hesitate to say drag queen because 'cause they're the type of man and woman's clothing who's not glam and gorgeous. They look like
right.
the man and woman clothing, and so they
Yeah.
have one of those always, like, leads the thing, and there's a lot of audience participation, there's a lot of screaming things back, sometimes they make you get up and do dances, a lot of times they'll squirt water
Wow.
guns into the audience. It's madness. It's the opposite of, like, proper British elevated theater. It's
Uh-huh.
hilarious, and they love it, and if you if
Uh-huh.
it's not Christmas if you haven't gone to a panto. And so,
Yeah,
there's all these things like that that everyone just knows, and
yeah.
they're shocked that Americans don't know it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely I mean, that's the thing is, there's just, people don't even realize how ingrained certain habits, certain traditions
Mhm.
are. And that's I think the thing that's great about travel is when you get outside of your bubble, your country bubble, you realize, wow, I just came back from Japan and you talk about total
Yeah,
differences
that's a
in
big change.
culture and yeah, and just the way even the way you hand people money is and all
Mhm.
of that, and just the things that, people do at in the subway and it's just everyone lines up very orderly, and it's like it's very interesting. So,
I
um
love that element of British
mm,
culture.
mhm,
Bubble is an interesting way to also go into one of the things that I've really noticed, which is that Americans tend to own their own bubbles, whereas Britain is a collective bubble in a lot of ways.
mhm,
Part of that is in terms of there's certain cultural touchstones that everybody knows and everybody does because it's a small country. For certain television shows, there's a national brownout during the first commercial break because everyone's put their kettles on. I'm not making that up. That's a thing. Because everyone's watching the same few shows because BBC.
yeah,
So there's some of that, but also it's really interesting in the US, and US itself is like 8 different countries, as we all know. Culturally, they're
yeah,
different, but some things are pretty broad. US is more about personal convenience, personal space, personal immediacy. So you hop in your car, which is parked in your driveway of your big
mhm,
house, and drive directly to the door of where you need to go.
right,
In the UK, first of all, the houses are smaller generally and much closer together unless you're in the
mhm,
countryside, but then there's more countryside.
mhm,
So the collective civilization space is more together so that the
mhm,
collective open space can be more of a thing. And also the public transportation options. Um, it's a
mm,
more walking friendly society. I
mhm,
have a good friend who travels to the US quite often, and when he's traveling in the US, he doesn't have a car, and
mhm.
he's shocked by how hard it is to get around much of the
Oh,
US without a car. It's
yeah,
impossible.
it is. I
And the
know.
UK is a lot less like that.
Mhm.
They're also a lot more environmentally conscious. I'm accustomed to our trash schedule in New York was we had full on trash twice a week
Mhm,
and then recycling maybe once a week, maybe it's every other week. Here, we have full on trash every other week. You're allowed a maximum of 3 bags,
mhm,
um, and recycling every other week and compost every week.
mhm.
Compost is part of it.
Yeah,
I'm like, "Wow," because they
I
really want you to waste less.
in Japan, you have to divide your trash into, like, burnable trash and other trash and recyclable, and it's very strict there, and they actually don't
Yeah.
have any trash on the streets, trash
Mhm.
cans on the street, and it's super clean.
I've
So I'm
noticed
walking
that
around.
here too.
Yeah,
London
yeah,
has very few trash cans because of political situations in the past.
yep,
Things
same.
happened in trash cans. But
Mhm.
they but my kid that was one of the first things my kids noticed on their first trip to London. They said, "There's no bins,
Yeah,
but there's no litter." I said, "Yeah, because
yeah,
people just don't."
yeah. Yeah, so I'm walking around with pockets full of trash, hoping to find a trash can at
Still have a
somewhere.
muffin wrapper in my coat because 'cause I'm like,
Yes.
I had a muffin and I didn't have a trash.
I know. So let's talk about just even what's been the hardest thing? I know there's probably a lot of hard things, but what has been the hardest thing and the most unexpected joyful thing that you have found about moving your family overseas?
Hardest thing has, I think, been the allocation of energy. That's been a struggle this entire year because
Mhm.
first, a lot of my back when we were in New York, I had to focus so much energy on the process of figuring out getting the visas for my family, which was complicated because I had a full-time job that I got laid off from at the beginning of the year. And there were financial requirements on me because
Mm.
I'm the sponsor of the visa.
Ah.
So, and then we also there were all sorts of things we had to do. There's a lot of stuff where you couldn't do this until you did this, but before you do this, you have to do this. So all of that just took up an exorbitant amount of mental energy for all of the year. Then when I was finally moving over, again, it was frustrating that I couldn't set up housing more in advance. And everyone was like, "How are you moving there without housing?" I had to rely on friends, on a combination of hotels and Airbnbs. I'm so grateful to the friends who put me up. It was like, "Don't people want to rent these places out? Like, why won't
Mhm.
anyone show me things?" And so that was frustrating and it's exhausting and just I feel like still we're still playing catch up. There's still some boxes and that we haven't found places for yet because we're moving from a much bigger house to a much smaller house. As I was saying to you before, I had a nice studio set up in my old house. I had a
Mhm.
whole room, I had an office, and here I'm at my dining room table, and my
Yeah.
husband's office is in our bedroom. So I feel like I'm still playing catch up. My daughter commented the other day, she feels like our family doesn't have any time together because by the time they get home from school, it's already dark because it gets dark
Mm.
very early here in the winter.
Mm.
And my husband has calls on New York hours, so she feels like we
Mhm.
don't get time between
Mhm.
school and bed, so we're trying to work on how we can make that better. It's
Right.
just everything just feels more exhausting than it needs to right now because 'cause we're still in the process of settling, and the day ends and I wonder where it's gone. Um,
Mhm.
so that has been the hardest part. We need to adjust our energy energy
Yeah.
but it's understandable. I'm trying not to beat myself up over it because who wouldn't be in this situation is what I'm
Right.
reminding myself.
Yeah.
And the unexpected joy, there have been a lot of joys, and some of them I definitely expected. It's I am delighting in the cultural difference that I pointed out before about how I feel like it's more of a collective society.
Mhm.
Here, it's more of a society. And I'm looking at kinda the American ways of kind of everything being geared towards the convenience of the individual versus
Mhm.
the convenience of the many or
Mhm.
inconvenience of the many, but, you know, just those considerations, it is different, and I do like that. I like feeling a place that feels a little more unified, and the Brits laugh when I say that because, of course, they don't feel that at all because they're very keenly aware of their problems, which I'm
Right.
certainly about because I'm a member of this society now. I need to look at it not with rose-colored glasses. I'm not
Mhm.
visiting, I'm in it, but it is different, and it is a lot more communal, and I'm enjoying that. I like the spirit of it. The one thing I hate, 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 this is the number one thing I'm having trouble with, and I will have trouble with it as long as we are here, even if that's the rest of our lives.
Mhm.
Fires.
Oh,
Close.
I don't have as many.
To from starting to do a load of laundry to having it fully dry and ready to put away, for that to be maybe 2 hours. Do I put it
Yeah.
away at the end? No. But I'm used to that being a 2-hour process, and
Yeah.
here, the washing machine itself takes 3.5 hours. We do have clothes dryers, but they're mostly condenser based rather than vented, and so they don't really get your clothes clean. They're just kinda, you know, evaporating and then putting the water back on it. So you have to hang your clothes. People say, "Oh, the washing only takes a few hours to dry." Lies. Lies, lies, lies. Air is made of water. It takes
Yeah.
days for my clothes to dry, and I'm not that organized.
Yeah, it definitely is. There's just so many things changes to get used to, for sure. Hard. Well, Christine, this has been amazing. The half hour just always flies by, but thank you for sharing all your wisdom on this. I know that there's lots of people who are thinking about an overseas move, and I think the thing that's wonderful about our world is that it is easier than ever to
Yeah.
make an overseas move. That being said, it's still challenging, so many things, and takes, I'm sure, will take a while to really feel settled in, but it's great that you are doing it and chasing after that dream even when you had a comfortable life, because I think
And I'm
that's
grateful that our modern world also, is why I had so many friends here and why I didn't just show up and have to figure everything out myself. Some of
right,
my friends
right.
helped me with the visa
Mm,
process, helped me with the getting a house process, literally let me stay in their homes, and the whole
mhm.
reason I had those relationships is because technology connected us to begin with. And if
Yeah,
anyone out there is considering an overseas move, I have resources that I can
yeah.
certainly direct them towards that have helped me, people who know more about it than I do. I'm happy to put you in touch for sure with the thing
Yeah,
that does.
that's awesome, that's awesome. And as always, I like to end the, interview with a favorite motivational quote, inspirational saying.
Ooh.
I'm such a quote junkie and love to hear your favorite.
Um, again, I'm getting spicy here, but I literally asked my sister for a cross stitch of this phrase to hang up in my office, even though I don't have an office anymore, but I will again someday.
Uh-huh.
Which is carry yourself with the confidence of a mediocre white man. This has been a year of a lot of self-doubt, a
Uh-huh.
lot of questioning, there have been, like, professional shenanigans going on the side, and I've just had to remind myself every time I felt doubt in myself, would that dude have this doubt in himself? And he probably wouldn't, he'd probably just go for it. So go for it.
Go for it, figure it out on the way. That's it. That's awesome. That's hilarious. That's so great. Well, share where people can find you. Obviously, coaching people on overseas moves is not your main gig. Your main gig is branding.
Yes.
So, for sure, connect with Christine on branding questions, but also feel free to, as she said, reach out if you are considering it a
My
move. So
personal
share
brand is
where.
why I could do this. If
Yeah,
I
exactly.
I was already known in the UK,
Yeah.
and I've walked into events here since moving here where people I hadn't met totally knew who I was already, and that is
That's awesome.
gold.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. So share where people can find you, share your people can subscribe to your podcast.
Sure.
And
Well,
we'll have these links. Yeah.
I'm Christine, spelled the usual way, Christine. My last name is Gritmon, Grit, like when something's gritty like sand, Mon like Monday. So Gritmon. So I can be found at gritmon.com. And I'm also C Gritman on other things, including Instagram. Not on X much anymore,
Mhm.
but I am on Threads a bit more. I'm Christine Gritman and Christine Gritman Inc. on LinkedIn. I'm Christine Gritman Inc. on Facebook, not there much anymore
Yeah.
either. And I have my own awesome podcast that you are going to be on soon, which makes me very excited, called
Yeah.
Let's Talk About Brand. And that can be found on any podcast player as well as on YouTube. So again, but gritman.com will lead you to all of that. That's Grit, like when something's gritty, Mon, like Monday.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Christine, for all your wisdom and
Thank you.
good luck with continuing to settle in and enjoy the UK. And I have to come over for a visit.
Absolutely, we'll have tea. Lots of
Yeah.
tea
All right.
and
All
biscuits.
right. Yes, for sure. Love the biscuits. Bye.
Hope that was helpful, and make sure you grab the free guide, Top Tools for Late Starters, on the website at latestartersclub.com. And let's turn dreaming into doing.